The Poet of Tolstoy Park, Chapter 1, A Year to Live. Henry walked out of the doctor's office, and the drumming rain that had begun to fall went straight through his thin white hair, wetting his head and sending a chill down his back. Instead of putting on his hat, he placed the flat of his palm on his forehead and stroked the dampness accruing there. He sat down on the edge of the porch, quickly soaking the seat of his pants. Henry decided, because it was his option to do so, that he would abandon his boots. He paired them up evenly there on the boards. Henry could not remember when last he had walked barefoot in the rain, mud squishing up between his toes. He believed it was Black Elk, or maybe Chief Seattle, who'd said that the man who always wears his moccasins thinks the earth is covered with leather. Henry looked at his boots and wondered how long they would sit before someone took them. Henry planted his palms on his knees, caressed the wet brown twilled trousers, and from those points levered himself to standing. He would let his feet know that this piece of earth was covered with mud, and thought perhaps they'd enjoy knowing that. He tilted his face downward and was lifting his rumpled and sweat-stained felt hat when he heard his name called, and looking up, saw a horse and wagon drawing near the plank sidewalk in front of which he stood. "Whoa back there, Bo," the driver said. The horse slowed his walk, its hooves sucking at the muddied street. "How do, Brother Webb?" Henry nodded to the man in the wagon. "Did you pray up this rain, Will?" Henry was making small talk, postponing, for a moment at least, what was coming. But the Reverend William Webb had been dealing with people of all stripes for 40 years, and Henry knew this preacher's practiced eye would discern that the news from the doctor was bad. "Henry," the preacher said, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, "Thomas and Harvey have been telling me something's bad wrong with you. Now Dr. Belton said it's consumption, Will," Henry said evenly. "Tuberculosis. He's given me a year to live. Maybe not that long, maybe a little more." Henry stood, like a patient man in line at a bank, his arms at his side. Nothing about him projected grave illness, and he could have passed for a man of 50, though he was 67. His clear blue eyes locked on the dark eyes of the preacher, darker still under the soaked brim of his hat. William Webb shook his head, then bent his face downward. When Will looked up, he said, "I'm sorry, Henry. This is a hard one, my friend." Stedman's Landing. Henry knew for certain it was Peter Stedman striding across the dock at the landing of the Bay Queen. A tall, thin fellow about Henry's own age, his hair and beard thick and black, no streaks of gray prominent enough to be detected under the bare bulb lights at Stedman's landing. His sleeves were untidily rolled up, and his forearms were muscled and sinewy. "I have no need to ask your name, Henry Stuart. I'm Peter Stedman." The man was smiling, his teeth even in the dim lights, appearing starkly white within his bushy beard. He extended his hand in greeting. "Glad to have you for a neighbor. I believe I could have picked you out in a stampede. When I read your letters, I saw a face to go with the voice I was hearing. Definitely your face, sir." "Traveling light, huh?" asked Peter, motioning for Henry to follow him to the spot on the dock where the Bay Queen passengers' luggage had been stacked and was watched by a porter. "My books." Henry patted his satchel, a fixture at his side now for 4 days. "And enough clothes to wear. What more does a man need?" "Well, shoes, perhaps," Peter grinned. So Peter, walking ahead of Henry to a black, high-topped Ford truck, a Model T, stepped onto its running board and tossed Henry's suitcase into the back. Peter cranked up and shifted the gears with a grind on their ride up the short hill back of the landing. They bounced along south a short distance on a well-traveled 2-lane shell road, then east on a dirt road that Peter called East Volanta Road. Peter pushed a knob and switched off his headlights, while still rolling along the rutted lane at a good clip, swerving once to avoid a pothole. "No risk it, no biscuit, they say." Peter laughed as all went black beyond the windscreen. Then in seconds their eyes adjusted to the moon's pale illumination of the landscape, and the dirt roadway sprang into ghostly form in soft focus ahead of the truck. Peter accelerated and laughed again. This is the way to enjoy a night's drive, by the light of the moon. Henry behind the wheel. "You okay?" Peter asked, coming around the front of his truck toward Henry. His hair was ruffled and his shirt opened several buttons. "I told Letty I had to get right over here. She said I should never have let you ride out a hurricane alone." "Oh, I'm all right, thank you, Peter." Henry began moving toward the barn. "Let me just get a lamp going in here and see what kind of mess I have." With Peter leading the way, the two men stepped through the doorway and onto the wet board floor of Henry's room. The planks felt cool and soft under Henry's bare feet. Paper and books were blown about, and the twigs and leaves were everywhere inside, just as they were outside on the ground. The supply of ashes flooded with the water on the floor, making a thick black mess. A puddle spread over half the wooden floor. Henry attended to the disarray in his home, the holes in the barn room, his eyes moving around the floor bathed in the yellow lamplight over the debris. Henry's appraisal failed to note the moccasin curled near Peter's right foot. Neither man saw the strike, but both heard the thump when its nose and fangs met Peter's calf just above his boot, and they heard the thin splash as it fell back, ready to spring again if the intruder did not retreat. Henry snatched Peter by the shirt sleeves and pulled him roughly away from the moccasin, taking the lantern all in a single rapid gesture. "Damn, damn, damn," Peter said, his jaw tight, his teeth clenched, as a searing firebrand heat spread up his leg. "Let's get you to a doctor," Henry said, "now." "Can you drive an automobile?" Peter asked, genuinely concerned as they approached the truck. Henry opened the passenger door. "Well, enough for our purposes for this evening, I do believe," Henry said. Waltz for Kate Anderson. The water was wine-colored, an iridescent plum hue reflecting the deepening palette of the cloudless twilight. First stars blinked on, and a boyish giddiness washed over Henry. "Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight," came into his head. "It's beautiful out this evening." A woman's voice right beside him startled Henry from his musings. "And you've chosen the best spot on the boat." The woman was in her 30s, attractive, with thick and wavy hair that caught the evening's dying light and shone like harvest wheat, and was gathered and pinned loosely about her head. Her shoulders were draped in a colorful hand-woven shawl of heavy wool that she drew up to her neck with one hand, while she placed the other on the balustrade near Henry's. "May I stand here and share this claim of yours?" The woman was addressing Henry, her gaze fixed across the open water. "Certainly. My name's Kate Anderson," she said, extending her hand and taking Henry's firmly. Henry shook her hand and introduced himself. She proved to be lively and inquisitive, and Henry found he rather liked her. She asked him a spate of questions. It seemed to Henry this woman was genuinely interested in his story, and he imagined she was like that with most people she met. Above the black and ragged tree line marking the horizon, way off in the distance to the east, there arose such a spectacular curve of yellow moon as Henry had never seen. It appeared huge and rose so fast that its emergence above the far shore was a visible motion. And this moonrise was happening with the wash of sunlight not yet completely vanished from the western sky. Neither spoke a word for 5 full minutes as the harvest moon's golden face transformed to snowy silver as it ascended. Henry put his hand lightly on the woman's shoulder, risking the familiarity, but deeply desiring that degree of rapport. "Yes, Miss Anderson, I feel I'm being borne home over these calm waves." Then Henry fell silent, nor did Kate speak. What was left unsaid was being spoken to them both in nature's own sweet, silent language, and they were pleased to listen. Henry Stuart's theme. "Tell me the plan, Henry," Peter Stedman said, wide-eyed and looking all about at the pile of blocks and the excavated circular foundation. "What in God's name have you got going here? You've gone completely mad in Tolstoy Park," Peter said, shaking his head. "When Letty first told me you were building a little round house for yourself, I thought it was the snake juice talking. Now I see it with my own eyes, and I still don't believe it." "Well," said Henry, "that night I spent in the cistern, hiding from the storm, caused me to believe a man could no better construct a dwelling than to have his walls go round in a circle. I suppose the birds must be on to something. So here you have my bird's nest. My foundation is 14 feet across, and I've decided I'll make it 14 feet high to the topmost part of a domed roof. Then I shall plaster over the entire dome with a coat of mortar mix." "So you'll have a door there?" Peter asked, indicating the stoop. "The Navajo hogan," said Henry, "is something like my hut. It has its door facing east to greet the rising sun. Now I've given into a bit of old age melodrama and looked to the setting sun with my door." Henry waited for Peter's reaction, but Peter let it go by. "What about windows?" Peter asked. 6 of them," Henry said, "spaced equidistant from the door, and that should provide ample ventilation and cooling in your Alabama summers. I should be quite comfortable." "Amazing," said Peter, "just amazing." Then Peter's face clouded, and he shifted his stance, shuffling his feet where he stood. "I've got to ask you this, Henry. You're talking about living through summers and winters, but, well, Letty tells me you're a mighty sick man, Henry. Has she got her story straight? Said you told her yourself." "It's true, Peter. I'm supposed to die." "Well, hell, I reckon so. Me too." "But my doctor in Idaho gave me only a year or so, Peter," Henry said. "Maybe he's a quack," said Peter. "Yes, if there was not this feeling in my body." Henry hesitated, and they stood in silence for half a minute. "But I've decided, Peter. I'll be here when death comes. I won't be complicit beyond that, only to be here. I will not face away. I will not hide, nor shall I cringe, but I won't step one step to meet my death. I'll be here working when death comes, or I'll be sleeping when death comes. I will not reconcile the possibilities of my future with death." Then there was another space of heavy silence. "Well," said Peter, "I'm going to leave you alone, friend. I'm not 10 minutes from here. I'll come if you change your mind and need a hand, or I'll come and sit a spell and shoot the breeze if you get lonesome." Peter hobbled to his truck and drove away, and as the quiet descended once again on Tolstoy Park, Henry felt as he thought Parsifal must have felt when he finally found the Holy Grail. Henry's prize was his work, and he would get to it. He looked and saw his neat gray blocks in a stack, and the crushed brown grass and diligent beetle wrestling home its prize. He felt the cool soil on the soles of his feet, and the wrinkle of his shirt cuffs at his wrist, and the warm sun on his scalp. He closed his eyes and inhaled and smelled wood smoke and pine needles, the mound of damp earth, the brackish bay water and her countless crabs and mullet. He stood and remembered being taught by a Shoshone woman in Idaho to chew one raisin slowly, and to swallow it even more slowly. Henry opened his eyes, and he lifted his arms, testing his shoulder joints. It was time to go to work. Henry had a round house to build. Today I am leaving home. And Henry knew that like this June morning's wind, soon he would leave his house, and he would not return. The death that had been put off so strangely those many years ago would make a renewed call for him, and he would answer without alarm or regret, without hand-wringing or weeping. He had heard the scree of an osprey yesterday. He had raised his eyes to the sky, but had seen nothing there. Then he had heard the cry again from directly overhead where he was looking, but still he saw nothing. And he came to believe his death song was being raised by the fish hawk. So yes, he would go back to Idaho, and he would see Will again. He would see his sons again. He opened his journal and wrote with the pencil at the top of a clean page, June 11th, 1944. Today after sunup, Thomas will come from his hotel. 19 years in Alabama. Today I am going back to Idaho. Today I am leaving home. Henry closed his eyes and saw a swirling of years cascading back to a muddy slog down Rainier Street in Nampa, leaving that doctor's office with an invitation to die called out to him over his shoulder. Near 20 years ago. Now he was 86. Then later on the train, somewhere west of Memphis, it angled to the north, and Henry had a view of the distant plains horizon rolling upward to meet the orange sun. He put his head against the glass. Even in the dawning summer, the window was cold to Henry, and the chill and the steely vibration of the wheels over the rails tingled his forehead. Henry looked across the seat at Thomas, himself now a silver hair, and he became suddenly and deeply tired, but not weary as from exhaustion, more like the warm willingness to lie down and sleep at the end of a day bent to hard work. His feet were cold. Henry knew his feet would never again feel the fire in the earth. This buzzing in the train floor would fade and stop. Perhaps Tolstoy, as he lay dying in a train station, felt the rumbling of a distant train. This train would arrive where Henry had boarded it, in Idaho, and Thomas would lift him from his seat by the window. "You need a hand there, mister?" And Thomas would say, "No, he's my father. He's just sleeping." And his son would take him home and lay him in the room where he and Molly had slept together. Harvey would have put clean sheets on the bed and turned back the covers. The doctor would be summoned, and perhaps a preacher, but not Will Webb. He no longer waited for Henry. 30 miles back, Henry had felt Will leave him, but not for long.